If you do have an MTHFR variant, you don't need to panic. You don't need to detox your MTHFR and you don't need to fix your genes. What you do need is context. You need to look at you, your genetics alongside your labs, how you're eating, when you're eating, how you're sleeping, and when. Your stress, your movement, environment, your symptoms, your health history, all of that is where the answers get so much more interesting and so much more impactful. And please don't forget what we talked about throughout this episode. Genetics gives us information about potential. It does not tell us your destiny. Welcome to the Everyday Epigenetics Raw, Real, Relatable podcast. I'm your host, Susan Robbins, epigenetic human performance coach. This is where we discuss all things lifestyle, environment, food, exercise, work, mind, and social interaction as they pertain to epigenetic expression in a way that's relatable to everyone. So if you're ready to start viewing you as an individual, take control of your life and health, and get results, buckle up, here we go. Welcome to the Everyday Epigenetics Raw, Real, Relatable podcast. I'm your host, Susan Robbins. This is the place where we talk about everything lifestyle and environment and how it relates to our genetic expression. Today, buckle up, people, because it is just me. And you know, when I have something to talk about, it's going to be a little fiery. And today is going to be a little fiery. So I'm going to be talking MTHFR. And I know many of you have asked for me to put something out about MTHFR. It's about damn time. I know. And it actually took me, oh my God, the last 2 months to put this together. It takes me a while to write a podcast. The recording isn't the bad part. It's the writing it, because I don't want to put stuff out that is incorrect. And I just want to put quality out. So it takes me a while. So thank you for those who have been bearing with me to get this info out there. So it's going to be MTHFR fact versus fiction, because there's some facts out there and there is a ton of fiction out there, lots of myths. And if you've spent any time in MTHFR Facebook groups, as I have, you probably noticed there is no shortage of opinions. I recently came across a post, can't make it up, from a practitioner. Now, this was a board-certified naturopath. So not just a coach claiming to be some practitioner knowing everything and is just a sups for snips. And if you've worked with me or heard me, it's the DNA people that are like, oh, you have this, here's your supplement. So we know there's so much more to it. But this practitioner was claiming that MTHFR isn't real, that your genes change, that MTHFR testing is basically an inflammation marker. And then at the same time, on the other end of the spectrum, MTHFR is getting blamed for just about freaking everything. Somebody thinks it's MTHFR because they're tired or they're dealing with brain fog, histamine, can't lose weight. It's MTHFR. And we have to put an end to this. We have to get the right information out here. And I've wanted to record it because there's so much misinformation coming from both directions. And if I could tell you the amount of posts I've read that start with, I have blank. Like I said, I have fatigue. I have inability to lose weight. I have hormone issues. I am not detoxing. Is this MTHFR? Or here's another one of my favorites. What do we take for MTHFR? We. Drives me crazy. Everybody with an MTHFR variant should be taking the exact same supplement, please. Or what specialist treats MTHFR? How do I fix my MTHFR? How do I detox MTHFR? How do I reverse MTHFR? And I'm not kidding you. These are actual things I have jotted down that I'm seeing on social media. And every time I read the questions, I think we're asking the wrong questions. So I'm going to separate the fact from fiction, not to convince you that MTHFR is the answer to every health problem, but not to dismiss it either. I simply want to help you understand what MTHFR is, what it does, and what it doesn't do. Because once you understand that, you're going to stop chasing one snip and you're going to start looking at the whole picture. And that's where personalized health, and you know I am all personalized, precision health. It's where it begins. So let's start with fact or fiction number one. what is MTHFR? So before we get into all the myths, let's make sure we're actually talking about the same thing. So MTHFR, it's a gene. It's actually a gene that every single one of us has. So when I hear someone saying, I have MTHFR, of course you do, because we all have MTHFR genes. So watch again, words matter. We all have MTHFR. The letters MTHFR stand for methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase. So hopefully I've pronounced that right. I probably say it different every time I say it. And it's simply the name of the enzyme that the genes help produce. Don't worry about memorizing the name. It doesn't matter. The important part is understanding what it actually does. So its primary job is helping convert folate into 5-MTHF. That's the primary circulating and biologically active form of folate that your body can utilize. So before we go any further, there's one point I want to clear up that also causes a lot of confusion. Folate and folic acid, they are not the same thing, okay? Folate is the naturally occurring form. It's vitamin B9 and is found in foods like leafy greens, asparagus, legumes, avocado, liver. And folic acid is the synthetic form. It's the crap added to all the enriched and fortified foods that we find in fortified foods, and we also find them in supplements. It's in a lot of the cheaper supplements. So if you guys are out buying your supplements at the drugstore and stuff, take a look, because you're likely Centrum. I have two clients who just got off of the crappy multivitamin Centrum. It's folic acid. So people tend to use those terms interchangeably all the time, but they are not the same thing. And your body has to process folic acid through several enzymatic steps before it can become the 5-MTHF. And later in this episode, we're going to talk about another gene that nobody talks about called DHFR that plays a massive role in that process. It is not just MTHFR. Now, for this time right now, let's just remember natural folate, synthetic folic acid. Okay. Now, when the 5-MTHF is available, it participates in a process called methylation. Big buzzword now. A few years ago, nobody heard of methylation. Then Gary Brecka goes on Joe Rogan's podcast after working with Dana White from UFC, and suddenly everybody and their brother is talking about methylation. So millions of people heard that conversation, and the interest in genetics blew up. That was fantastic because it made people curious. But there were a lot of erroneous claims in that. I'm not going to get into that. If you want to, the best thing that I have found, the one of the best, gosh, it wasn't a podcast. He did a YouTube video, Chris Masterjohn. He's fantastic around methylation, and he went in and set kind of the record straight where Mr. Brecka was incorrect on that podcast. So you can find it on YouTube, Chris Masterjohn, Gary Brecka. Take a look at that, and you can educate yourself a little bit more. So I'm not going to sit here and bash or go through all that, but again, just giving out information. Where I think we really started to fall into trouble was when people began believing that looking at just a handful of genes from that podcast could explain that, what everything that was wrong with their health. And I'm sorry, but biology, so much more complex than that. The body is a complex system. Now, methylation is a normal process that's happening in your body every second of the day. And you could think of it as one of your body's maintenance systems. It's involved in making neurotransmitters, producing energy, repairing DNA expression, recycles homocysteine, supporting detox pathways, hormone metabolism, and literally hundreds of reactions that keep you functioning and alive. So in other words, it's a pretty big deal. But the important part is if you weren't methylating, you wouldn't be listening to the podcast because you'd be dead. And so people say, I'm not methylating. I don't methylate. Yes, you do, or you wouldn't be here. We all do, right? And so it's whether the question to ask is around whether a part of that pathway may be working a bit less efficiently than somebody else's, or than optimally. Let's put it that way. It's a very, very different conversation. And that's one of the biggest myths that I want to clear up today. Having an MTHFR variant, and I have gone over the DNA 101, talking variants and normals. These are alleles, one from mom, one from dad, that create your genotype for that gene. Variant doesn't mean in MTHFR that methylation stops. Doesn't mean that your body cannot methylate. It means one enzyme and one pathway may be working a bit less efficiently. And in some cases, when there's homozygous or two variants, especially in one of the ones we'll talk about, 677T, that it's likely working much less efficiently, right? Up to about 25% max, right? So 70 to 75% less efficient. But that's pretty different from saying my methylation doesn't work. I don't methylate or it's broken. And so that distinction is very important, because one of my biggest frustrations is that we somehow convince people that if they have an MTHFR variant, they need methylfolate. That's it. That's all you need to do, really, based on one gene, without looking at the rest of the pathway, without looking at the rest of their genetics, without looking at the diet, labs, symptoms, anything else. And that's what you get with a lot of these genetic reports that are just methylation reports. You'll see the recommendation is just take this. And it's usually take this methylated vitamin. Sorry, that is not precision health. That is guessing, and it's generic. And it's one of the biggest reasons, again, I wanted to record this episode, because I just see the same misinformation repeated over and over, not just by people in Facebook groups trying to make sense of their health, but by coaches and some practitioners. And a lot of the fear, capital FEAR, surrounding MTHFR has been created by the very people who are supposed to be educating others. When I go through DNA reports with a client, I don't even release the report until we go over it in our 90-minute Zoom call, because I want my clients to I want to not create fear for my clients, because DNA is not to be feared. Having SNPs, having variants in genetics is not meant to create fear. And when someone sees an MTHFR variant, they're, again, most are told for every SNP they need a supplement. And they're told MTHFR explains an incredibly wide range of symptoms and health conditions. And they're handed recommendations based on one gene instead of looking at the entire person. That is not evidence-based. That is not precision health. Definitely not how I coach. So I'm going to separate the science from the freaking noise out there. So if we look at some of that, that was number one. So let's say this is fact or fiction number two. Quote, I was diagnosed with MTHFR. Anybody that knows me knows that this one ruffles my feathers. This is one of the ones I hear the most as well. I was diagnosed with MTHFR, or I tested positive for MTHFR, right? Or I have MTHFR. I already covered that. Of course you do. We all do. And so again, it's not whether you have the gene. The question is which versions, or more accurately, the alleles you have inherited from your parents. One from mom, one from dad, like I just said, and they create the genotype for that SNP. And as I've talked about in previous podcasts around DNA, those alleles can be what we commonly call normal, or they can be a variant. And a variant is not automatically a mutation. Terminology, hugely important here. A variant means simply that there is a difference in the DNA sequence at a particular location. And the important part is a difference doesn't automatically mean something's wrong. You have genetic variants all over your DNA. I have been doing DNA for over 7 years. Most of them have little to no effect on your overall health. Some of them can influence how a gene functions or how much of a protein is produced. Some are pathogenic, meaning that there is strong evidence that the variant can sometimes cause, but usually it's a contribute, right? There's a difference between causal or contributing to a particular health issue or disease. So why am I making such a big deal out of calling these MTHFR variants instead of mutations? Because a mutation implies something very different in the way people hear and use that word. So technically, a mutation is also a change in the DNA sequence. but the word is usually used when talking about DNA changes that are associated with disease or significant genetic abnormalities. And that's why calling these common MTHFR polymorphisms mutations is misleading. Okay. So it's MTHFR variants. They're common MTHFR variants. They're not mutations that mean you have a genetic disease. So MTHFR, not a diagnosis. It's not a disease. It is not a condition. There's common differences in the DNA sequence that it can affect how efficiently the MTHFR enzyme functions. Very different. So when I hear someone say, I have the MTHFR mutation, what they're usually talking about is a common genetic variant. So the variant, say with 677T, right? There's two we look at. There's the MTHFR 1298C and the 677T. And so someone will, for instance, have an AA in the 677T. That's pretty high impact. That's where even with two normals in the 1298C, you're going to have about 25% MTHFR activity, 25 to 30%. So that's pretty significant. But does it mean that something is wrong with your gene or that you have a disease or you're going to have all kinds of conditions because of it? No, it's just a difference in that DNA. A pathogenic variant is a DNA difference that has been shown to cause or contribute to disease. And the common MTHFR variants we're talking about here are not the same thing as the rare pathogenic variants that can cause severe issues like severe MTHFR deficiency. It's very uncommon. And that's a distinction I want people to understand. And this is where I think we, again, need to be really careful. I see DNA coaches, the practitioners, and others posting in MTHFR groups about all the diseases and conditions that MTHFR causes or leads to. Okay, may be associated with. Big difference, and does not mean it, quote, will happen to you. Very, very important to make that distinction. I saw one, she had posted a whole list of conditions that said they're all from MTHFR. And there's such a commonality in these conditions with things that are outside of MTHFR. Now, can MTHFR variants potentially contribute to maybe making those symptoms worse? Or sure, but it doesn't mean that having that variant it means you're going to develop that condition. Okay, I'm hoping this makes sense because it's just so frustrating. I'm trying to make this again relatable to my general population here. When we start listing disease after disease that someone with an MTHFR variant, according to these practitioners, might develop without putting that information into context, we are creating fear. And that's why you see this panic of people. Oh my God, I just tested positive. Oh my God, I just got diagnosed with. What do I do? And there is such a panic that comes from them. What do I take? How do I detox this out of here? How do I change this? Stop. Okay, need to stop. Take a breath. It's not a death sentence. It's not a sentence that you're going to live a lesser life. I have variants in both of the MTHFR genes and how I function, okay? Along with Lyme disease, gadolinium poisoning, lifestyle matters. So usually their step after this can lead to this is now you have this variant, so you need to supplement this to fix it. So now we're chasing SNPs instead of looking at the person. What are your symptoms? Is this happening? What else is happening? We're looking at supplements before we're looking at lifestyle, nutrition, environment, sleep, stress, movement, labs, like all of the other factors that influence how somebody's biology actually functions. This is not where I want people to start. Genetics matter. Lifestyle, environment, the interaction between them matters. It's the whole point of personalized health. And this is where epigenetics comes in. Epigenetics doesn't change that DNA sequence, right? And it's not going to change your alleles from a variant to a normal. It changes how the cell uses and regulates that DNA, including whether a gene is more or less active. You know how I say, dial the good genes up, dial the bad genes down. This is all about when and how it's expressed. The epigenetic changes will therefore influence the expression of a gene that contains a variant, but they do not remove or rewrite that variant. Okay, so very important to understand. So, no, you can't change your DNA. So, if you inherited an MTHFR variant, working with your diet, improving sleep, exercise, all of these things at the right times for you, reducing stress, changing your environment, all of that's going to help expression, but doesn't make the variant go away. Okay. So your DNA sequence stays the same. It's the expression and how your biology responds to the environment around you. That's the distinction between genetics and epigenetics. And it's important because I'm now seeing people saying that their genes actually change. No, your gene expression changes. Your epigenetic regulation can change. Your inherited DNA sequence does not change because you started exercising, changed your diet, got better sleep, or took a supplement. All right, number 3. We got 6 more to go. Number 3, I have an MTHFR variant, so I need a methylfolate. This one, again, drives me crazy. It's tossed up between a couple of them. But anyway, someone gets their DNA report, they see MTHFR variant, and they're told right away, again, you need methylfolate. Or they're told by ChatGPT or another AI, right to the methylfolate. So they're convinced also by social media influencers and the so-called specialists. Gary Breck has said it, so it must be true. Methylfolate, really? Like I said, based on one gene or 4 or 5, you got to look at the full person. And this is what I refer to as generic genetics. You guys all know how I feel about any one-size-fits-all approach. It's crap. And one of my biggest frustrations that we somehow convince people that if they have an MTHFR variant, methylfolate is automatically the answer. It's it's a so when I'm reviewing someone's DNA, I'm looking at multiple panels. So that means many, many, many different genes. I'm not looking at one methylation panel and deciding that that's going to tell me everything I need to know. And I'm certainly not relying on an ancestry-based DNA report to make health recommendations. We know quality assurance. I've talked about this, episode 48. I titled it DNA Decoded, the Truth About Genetic Testing and What You Need to Know. If you haven't listened to that one, go back and listen to it because I go much deeper into what the DNA tests can and can't tell you. Because when you're looking at just one gene or even just a handful, 5 or 6, without fully looking at the person, there is so much valuable information you're missing. And you can't just prescribe some supplement because of one SNP. It's like starting in the middle of a movie. You come in the middle, you miss the whole beginning. And so you're sitting there, I have no idea what's happening here. You're trying to figure out what's going on based on just that scene you're watching. Same with the DNA. If you're just looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things, you have no idea what came before in that scene. You have no idea what's coming next or what could happen. And remember that DNA is probabilities and propensities. It is not absolutes. So you're missing information that could completely interpret or change what you are seeing. And when I think about it, like when I worked a case in law enforcement, you talk to several witnesses, right? You talk to everybody that was around there. You look at all of the evidence. If you were to just show up and go, oh, he did it because he was there, he's got blood on his hands, he's guilty, right? DNA, no different. You can't do it that way. You have to look at everything that's happening. A little analogy I came up with is if you think of your body as a sandbox, all those genes are playing in there. They're playing in the sandbox. Some of them might be playing together and causing a little trouble. And then there's other that are peacefully coexisting, right? And you see that they're the little quiet ones in the corner. They're doing their thing. Yes, that is my analogy. I made that up. That was not AI. If it's stupid, you can blame me. But that's how I look at it. I always say it's like I talk, if you listen to me or coached with me, I always say all these things play together. And that's why it's like, it is, we're just like one big sandbox. If I'm reviewing someone's DNA, I'm not stopping at MTHFR. It's in the middle of my first report. I'm looking at the genes involved in folate metabolism, methylation, so things like DHFR, MTR, MTRR, BHMT, COMT, PEMT. Some of these people are like, what the hell is that? Never heard of it. And there's so many others, but I'm not looking at those genes in isolation. I'm looking at how those pieces fit into the bigger picture of that person. So if we look at DHFR for an example, because nobody talks about it, DHFR stands for dihydrofolate reductase. And one of its the most important job is to help convert folic acid into forms of folate that your body can use. So when someone has an MTHFR variant, think about this, but their DHFR activity is great. They're all normals, maybe one variant, but the rest all normals. That conversation is going to look really different from someone who has reduced DHFR activity and is regularly consuming synthetic folic acid through the junky fortified foods and supplements. Not the same person. Yet social media claims are going to say it's the same advice. The same person. Take methylfolate, avoid at all costs folic acid. Maybe, maybe not. Possibly. This is how I work, right? It depends. Depends on the individual. You have to do the deeper dive. And it's probably one of the most common phrases that I use with clients around everything is maybe, it depends. And I just was talking with somebody about supplements today, and I was like, I got to think on this. Let me work on this because I'm in the process of combining all of her stuff, looking through all of it, connecting the dots, putting that puzzle all the way together before I'm even going to recommend something. Context is key. And that's where we need to look at the whole picture. B12, it matters because it's part of this pathway. Homocysteine matters because it gives us information about what's happening downstream. And these are things, a lot of times I see physicians not test. I'm requesting this for two of my people right now. Folate status, that hardly ever gets tested. And you want to look at RBC folate where available. That tells us what folate is actually getting into the cells. Riboflavin, everybody hears B12 and folate, but riboflavin, MTHFR requires it as a cofactor. So that's why a lot of times I might go with some type of a B complex that contains all of these because these onesie twosies sometimes don't do the job. It has to be all in conjunction together. Again, depends on the individual. And then we have everything you're doing during the day, every single day, that influences how your biology functions. So you've got your diet, your timing, your chronobiology, as I've discussed, stress, your movement, your sleep, your environment. And then we're looking at labs and symptoms, health history, family history. All of this matters. And it matters the most when you tie them all together. Again, the difference with personalized precision health. It's never been about one snip, ever. And it's understanding how all these pieces come together in one unique human being, such as yourself or me. Number 4, my MTHFR variant is causing all of my symptoms. Probably one of the biggest problems I see in these groups. Somebody doesn't feel right. Like I said, tired, anxious, can't lose weight, hair loss, trouble sleeping, migraines, ADHD. Then we have fertility issues, autoimmune conditions. These are people desperately looking for answers. They've come down the road, so they finally are saying, I'm going to test for MTHFR. And then a variant pops up. And all of a sudden they think, oh, this is the why. This explains everything. And trust me, I get it. I have been there myself, as you've heard me talk about my own crazy struggles and my journey that I'm always on to just feel the best I can feel. When you don't feel good and you can't figure out why, you just want someone to listen. You want answers. You want something to make sense because you start to feel you're crazy. You've seen a bunch of different doctors, some coaches, nutritionists, all this shit. You've done every test under the sun. You've got all these different symptoms, tons of unanswered questions. And again, you're like, I must be going crazy. You're like gaslighting yourself at this point, right? So when you finally find something that might explain what's happening, you're going to grab onto it. But remember what we talked about in the first couple of myths. This is how unnecessary panic begins. You find a genetic variant, somebody tells you it may be associated with a whole list of conditions, and then somebody else tells you which supplements are going to fix it. Now you're afraid of your own DNA. So, could your MTHFR variant be contributing to something you're experiencing? 100%. But like I said, a couple back, contributing is not the same thing as causing. Contributing means it may be one piece of a much bigger picture. It may influence a pathway or increase a propensity, while other factors are totally involved. Causing suggests you've identified the reason for the problem. Very different claim. Certain MTHFR variants can affect enzymatic activity, which can influence folate metabolism, and in some circumstances, homocysteine levels. We'll see elevated homocysteine levels. And there's legitimate associations worth understanding, including research around fertility, pregnancy outcomes. We see miscarriages in people that have used the folic acid with MTHFR variants, and cardiovascular risk. I have seen this with many of my clients. But the association doesn't mean that having the variant will mean that you will develop that condition. And again, I can use me as an example. I've had elevated homocysteine, I've had elevated lipids, and I'm compound hetero MTHFR. Why is none of this expressing currently? Gee, could it be my lifestyle is dialed in? Wow. So it wasn't the cause. It was just helping to exacerbate because my choices, though I thought they were great, as many of you likely think you're doing all the right things, but potentially aren't. You can have the same MTHFR variant as somebody else and have a completely different health history, a completely different outcome. So instead of stopping at that one snip and saying, oh, this is the answer, I want you to look at the whole picture. What are you doing or not doing every single day? What are you eating? When are you eating? How are you sleeping? How are you managing your stress? How and when are you moving your body, if at all? What are you exposed to in your environment? What are you surrounding yourself with every single day that could be influencing your biology and your gene expression? Are you in a toxic relationship that's sucking the damn life out of you and altering your genetic expression? This happens more often than not. So those are the things that get lost when we make one snip the explanation for everything. Your genetics, lifestyle, environment, and interactions between all of them. Again, that's what matters. Personalized health. Genetics gives us information about potential, not absolutes, as I have stated continuously in my career over these past 7 years of doing DNA. Probabilities and propensities, not absolutes. So DNA, great clues, great information. I tell my people, if you're able to do the DNA with the PH360, it gives us so much information. Let's do it. But don't tend to just start there. It can help us understand why you may have certain propensities and help you make better, smarter decisions moving forward. Every time I start a DNA read with somebody, an interpretation, I start every single one this way. I go, DNA, not meant to diagnose, treat, or cure any illness or disease. It is information to help you make smarter, more targeted lifestyle decisions moving forward. Information is powering. It should not create fear. It's not making the diagnosis for us, right? And it doesn't dictate your future. That would be you, your choices. Number 5. Okay. The MTHFR test is wrong. This is the post, part of this post that I saw by this practitioner, this doctor that really made me think, okay, we need to talk about this. And people were posting and I'm just answering it, what WTF? And I said, I'm going to do a podcast on this. And again, this was a couple months ago. And they're like, please do, please do. So I want to, again, emphasize where this information is coming from. This is not some random person on social media throwing out a health opinion. This was posted by someone identifying herself, I'm not going to give her name, as a board-certified naturopathic practitioner. There's so much misinformation packed into this one post. I'm going to actually walk through it because it hits several of the exact myths that we've been talking about. and more. So, first of all, she starts by calling MTHFR, quote, a so-called genetic mutation. I'm going to give her a pass on the word mutation because of how commonly that it's referred to as mutations, even though we already talked about variants, and variant is the more accurate terminology. Only pass I'm giving this chick. That's it. Because what comes next is where the problems really begin. She says that if you've tested positive, quote, positive for an MTHFR mutation, are you just cringing by now? Your gene isn't actually mutated, and that there is something else happening behind the scenes that caused that test result. You know, let's get rid of the word positive, first of all. There isn't a positive MTHFR result in the way you have a positive test for an infection. A DNA test is telling you what genetic variants are present. It's telling you your genotype. You inherited those alleles from your parents. That is your DNA. Your genotype didn't suddenly change because you became inflamed or accumulated toxins, had a virus, or because your liver supposedly became overburdened. All of these claims by her. You cannot develop an MTHFR variant because your body became, quote, toxic. What can change is the expression. That is epigenetics. Do we need to say it again? Environment, nutrition, stress, sleep, movement, light exposure, all the things you're doing every day express those genes. They don't rewrite the DNA sequence you inherited. Then she makes another enormous leap here. She says the MTHFR test itself is inaccurate. And then she compares it to CRP, which is an inflammatory marker, and ANA, saying they're all inflammatory markers, and that's it. Okay, what? So CRP, inflammatory biomarker. ANA is an antibody test used in the evaluation of certain autoimmune conditions. MTHFR is a genetic test looking at your DNA. Can you get much different in the types of tests? MTHFR does not, that result isn't going to change because your CRP is elevated. Inflammation isn't causing the genetic test to give you a particular genotype. that, I'm telling you, this forest fire smoke here, it's freaking brutal. Another important distinction need to be made here. We absolutely can question whether testing common MTHFR variants is clinically useful. Sure, legitimate conversation. It is for some things, and for others, it's not going to play a part. It is not the be all end all. But saying that the test is inaccurate because inflammation is elevated is a completely different claim that is absolutely erroneous. A genetic test can accurately identify a genetic variant without that variant necessarily being the explanation for why you don't feel good. Two different questions. And then the post goes further. It says that a, quote, positive MTHFR result is an indication that metals, viruses, and toxic byproducts have accumulated over time. It talks about the blood becoming thick, sticky, and dirty, an overburdened liver, and a congested intestinal tract causing malabsorption. That's not an explanation for an MTHFR genotype. That's taking a genetic finding and building in a whole toxin narrative around it. And I didn't look this lady up, but I'm wondering if she sells a detox program. Because I'm going to have to look. And imagine where this takes a person. They're scared shitless of their MTHFR, right? They're afraid they're not detoxing. So this is where that how do I detox comes in. They're worried about their liver being overburdened. Oh my God, how do I detox my liver now? And now they're looking for something to take to fix that problem. So we've gone from a genetic variant to a supplement and detox rabbit hole without ever stopping to ask what's actually happening with the person. And that's what I don't want you to do. Genetics matters, but everything happening around those genes matters. So it's really, that's the crux of what I want you to walk away understanding from this episode. Number 6, MTHFR means you can't detox properly. Another claim buried in that post, and it's one I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on because I already covered the bigger issue of detox culture, and I talk about MTHFR in there. It's episode 124. Go check it out. It's how detox culture potentially harming. But it absolutely needs to be addressed here because MTHFR gets dragged into that conversation constantly. Having a variant does not mean you can't detox. It doesn't mean your body is accumulating toxins simply because you carry an allele. And it certainly doesn't mean that you need to, quote, detox your MTHFR. If you want the deeper conversation about the whole detox culture, again, go back, listen to 124. And for this episode today, I want you to remember something much more simple. An MTHFR variant is genetic information. It is not a toxin test. So if you're concerned about your environmental exposures, let's look at your actual environment. You can do specific testing around it if you need to, but typically start around your food. What's your nutrition like? If you're concerned about your labs, let's look at your labs. Let's put it all together. That's how we get answers. We don't take a variant and turn it into a diagnosis of toxic overload. On to number 7. If you have MTHFR, you need to follow an MTHFR diet. This is another claim from that same post of that board certified naturopathic practitioner. The post says the quote, bottom line is that we all need to lower our fat intake, which supposedly helps the liver cleanse and recover from methylation and absorption issues, and that the primary solution to inflammation is to lower fat and increase, quote, clean carbohydrates. All right. I know there's books out there about MTHFR or about genetics as a whole, one that I actually like, but as soon as I saw he put in the MTHFR diet or anything, I never looked at it because I know that that is one size fits all and it does not work for everybody. But so much other good information in that book. I know, and there's practitioners that have created MTHFR-specific diets. So I'm not going to pretend those recommendations don't exist. Here's the problem. There's no one diet that every person with an MTHFR variant needs to follow, or anything that every one person needs to follow. And again, it's true whether you have an MTHFR variant or not. And so one of the reasons I use the pH360 with my clients, I don't believe there is one perfect diet for every human being, only what's perfect for that person. Your genetics can give us information, absolutely. But when we're looking at the whole person and how their individual biology responds, that's precision. And that's what I do with the pH360, right? Because we're looking at everything around that individual, how they were created, their chronobiology, all of that to be very precise in what that individual needs. Now, two people can have the same MTHFR variant and they can have very different nutritional needs. So even if two people have similar genetics, they're not living the same life. I've done DNA on identical twins who live very, very different lifestyles, very different profiles. They're not eating the same foods. They're not eating at the same times. They sleep differently. They train differently. You might have one smokes and one doesn't. They're not moving the same way and they're not living in the same environment. And when I see someone say, you have MTHFR, so you need to eat this way and avoid that, I want you to just pause. I want you to say, what does that recommendation have to do with you specifically? What are your labs telling us? What are your symptoms telling us? What does the rest of your DNA show? And again, I'm going back to that rest of the DNA. Another thing I see in those groups is, what's the cheapest way to test? Go back and listen to my DNA episode. You get what you pay for. And you want a full array. Let's look at, what does your lifestyle look like? Timing. I'm not interested in giving you an MTHFR diet. I'm interested in figuring out what works for your body, and that's where you should be. It's a very different approach. Your DNA can inform your choices, but it does not hand you a diet plan, okay? And so what I don't want people taking from this is looking at an MTHFR variant and turning it into another set of food rules that do not apply to them. We absolutely need to and can do better than that. Next one. If you have MTHFR, you need supplements to fix it. So we're back to the subs for SNPs. And after telling people that MTHFR is supposedly connected to toxins, inflammation, liver congestion, malabsorption, all kinds of chronic illness, the post then gives you a full list of supplements to take. And this is where I want you to really slow down, because a genetic variant does not automatically tell you what supplements you need. How many times do I have to say this, right? Same thing we've been talking about this whole episode. If you see an MTHFR variant, you get scared. Someone tells you that variant, what it supposedly means, and that here's your supplement protocol. Run. Because what if you don't need all of those supplements? I try to give my people only what they absolutely need. What if one of those makes you feel worse? Had that happen. Had it happen with me. And I remember my naturopath at the time saying, that shouldn't happen. Okay, it did. It did this to me. You have to listen to the person because you're going to know your body better than anybody else. What if you're already getting enough of that particular nutrient? What if your labs aren't showing a deficiency, but yet you're throwing more and more in, and more is not better? What if another genetic variant is going to affect how you respond to that supplement? That's why you have to look at more. What if your symptoms actually have nothing to do with MTHFR? That's why I don't believe in subs for SNPs. I want to understand the person first, which is what you should do. Now, the nutrients that are hugely important to the pathways we're talking about: folate, B12, riboflavin. There's so many others that matter as well. Choline. But that doesn't mean that everyone with an MTHFR variant needs the same form, the same dose, or even that supplement at all. Same thing with B12, right? You don't determine that someone needs a particular form or dose simply because they have an MTHFR variant. You look at their actual B12 status. You look at their labs, their symptoms, their diet, the genetics, the whole picture. And that's the difference between using genetics to inform a decision and using genetics to make a decision for you. DNA for the clues helps us best ask better questions, or it should, but it shouldn't send you running to Amazon for a cabinet full of supplements that you don't even know are right for you. And I want to say this again: don't supplement your fear. Understand your genetics. Look at your labs, your lifestyle, environment, and then make decisions based on you. That's precision personalized health. Last one. If you have MTHFR variants, folic acid, no big deal. You're fine. You'll hear that from doctors. I kid you not. Another area where I want to be very clear, because I've personally seen problems with folic acid in my practice. I am not a doctor. I am not a research scientist. I'm coming from what I have seen in my practice. I found folic acid in the supplements of my clients. A lot of them are eating folic acid foods, like a lot, like 6 to 10 times or more a week. And I have had clients who clearly did not tolerate it well. The buildup was a lot. So when I hear people casually say, oh, folic acid's fine, or tell somebody with MTHFR it's okay to take it without ever looking at a person's folate pathway, how that's working, that's concerning. Now, yes, folic acid, synthetic. It's the form used to fortify, again, packaged grain products, found in a lot of supplements, and your body has to process it. And that's where we look at and convert it to folate. And so we, again, look at things like the DHFR. So DHFR activity, it varies considerably between people. And when that capacity is exceeded, you got that bucket, folic acid bucket, if you're eating it or taking it every day in a supplement, that unmetabolized folic acid, it can appear in the blood. It can cause some issues. And so the question isn't simply, do you have MTHFR? Because I have MTHFR, but I digress. We're also looking at DHFR and how the entire pathway is functioning. And I've seen what I consider folic acid toxicity or intolerance in my practice. Disturbances, excitability, sleep problems, itching, sour mouth, skin reactions, irritability. I had one client, we put it together that he was having some precancerous mouth sores. He was taking in massive amounts of folic acid on a daily basis and put the pieces together. And this is, I did a deep dive into my clinical AI through PH360 CLIA. And I started doing the deep dive. I'm like, these are the genetics. Could this be playing a part? Because I know that we can get some mouth sores. And it was like, actually, yes. And so we got him to stop the folic acid intake. And guess what went away? Bingo. So I'm just telling you what I've seen in my practice, that it can play a part. Does it with everybody? Nope. For some people, that folic acid bucket, it fills up pretty quickly, just like histamine, right? Fills up quickly. And then there's other, especially when there's other variants affecting MTHFR and or DHFR. And for others, it may just be a slow drip that is not impactful. And I do want to acknowledge what the CDC says too, because I don't want anybody to say I ignore the other side of this conversation. So CDC currently recommends 400 micrograms of folic acid. Can't make it up. Daily for people who could become pregnant, and specifically says that common MTHFR variants are not a reason to use a different form of folate. I don't agree with applying that as a blanket recommendation to every individual. Guidelines are designed around populations, and I'm looking at the person sitting in front of me. So look at you, not the general population. And I don't know, do we actually really trust anybody at the CDC anymore? So I've seen enough in my own practice that I'm not going to tell someone, don't worry about it. Folic acid is fine when their own history and response are telling us otherwise, right? So could someone with really good optimal DHFR activity, and for example, like one variant in the 1298C, which is lesser impact variant, occasionally encounter a small amount of folic acid in a fortified food and be okay? Probably, right? And maybe another one couldn't. But it's different from deliberately taking folic acid every day in a supplement or regularly consuming large amounts through your fortified or enriched foods. So if you do have variants in MTHFR, or more importantly, DHFR too, dial back the folic acid, get it out of the supplements that you're not taking on a daily basis. Now, if you want to go have a piece of bread a few times a year, do it. See how you react, but pay attention when you're not taking it, how you feel, as opposed to when you do eat it, geez, how do I feel? Because I'm telling you, the majority of my people feel better. And one more piece I think important, National Institute of Health acknowledges that people vary in their ability to process folic acid, and that unmetabolized folic acid can appear in the blood when DHFR capacity is exceeded, and that the potential health consequences of circulating unmetabolized folic acid are still being studied. So I thought that was interesting. So again, I'm not telling you to panic because you accidentally ate something containing folic acid. This is where people panic again. Oh my God, I ate a piece of pizza. Now something's gonna happen. Stop. Let's not panic. Okay? It didn't kill you. You're okay. And don't be the person that says, oh my God, I've been eating folic acid for however, I need to detox. How do I get it out of my body? Stop consuming it. You don't need to go on some crazy detox protocol because you ate a fortified food or an enriched food or took the vitamin. Stop adding more of it and give your body the opportunity to do what it does, to clean itself out. I had a client, I switched her over to, I think it was a methyl-free multivitamin for her child, because I said, she was giving him the cheaper one that had folic acid. And I said, does he experience any agitation? She's like, oh yeah. And ADHD and not ADHD, autism. And I said, let's do this and see how he does. Guess what? Agitation gone. So could it have been the folic acid on a daily basis with a body like that? 100%. Who knows? What I want you to do is start eating foods that are naturally rich in folate. Dark leafy greens, spinach, asparagus, Brussels sprouts, avocado, beans, peas. No, beans are not the bad guy, people. They're naturally occurring folate sources. They're not synthetic folic acid added to the food. I actually had a client who had a pretty serious reaction that we believed also was ongoing folic acid exposure. Found it in supplements, removed it, reaction stopped. Like I said, I've seen it several times, not hundreds. You just have to pay attention to you. One of the things that I love about the human body is our bodies are amazing when we give it the right things at the right times. Simple as that. Read your labels, look at your supplements, look at your packaged foods. Don't buy all the packaged foods. Costco, go for the organic veggies there instead of the packaged stuff. And if something is enriched or fortified, check what's actually added. Look at the labels. It's all in there. Be your own food detective. Know what you're getting, because this is exactly where personalized health matters. A broad recommendation may be appropriate for the population, but it doesn't mean it's telling me everything I need to know about you. I'm interested in what your genetics show, what your labs show, what you're eating, what you're taking, and more importantly, how your body is responding. So there you go. 9 myths or truths around MTHFR, several of them resulting from one pretty egregious post that I saw on an MTHFR Facebook group page. And I hope you can see why I felt this episode was necessary. Common MTHFR variants, actually really common. Depending on the population, you're looking at roughly 50% of the people, up to 50% of people can carry at least one copy in the 677T or 1298C. It's not some bizarre, ultra rare genetic finding. It doesn't mean it's meaningless. These variants can matter, absolutely, but they don't mean you have a disease, and they don't mean that every symptom or health condition you experience is caused by MTHFR. And if you do have an MTHFR variant, you don't need to panic. You don't need to detox your MTHFR, and you don't need to fix your genes. What you do need is context. You need to look at you, your genetics alongside your labs, how you're eating, when you're eating, how you're sleeping, and when. Your stress, your movement, environment, your symptoms, your health history, all of that is where the answers get so much more interesting and so much more impactful. And please don't forget what we talked about throughout this episode. Genetics gives us information about potential. It does not tell us your destiny. I know what it's like to desperately want an answer when you don't feel right. I have been there, been there, been there. And when you finally find something that seems to explain what's happening, it's so easy to grab it, hold on to it, not let it go. But don't let one genetic variant become your explanation for everything. And don't let someone else's interpretation of your DNA scare you. Just because you saw it on social media doesn't make it true. If you see it on AI but have no working knowledge to fact check it, may not be right. Ask questions. Look at the evidence. Look at the complex system of the person, the whole. Because your body is far more complex than one or a few SNPs. It's never just about one SNP. It's about understanding how all of these pieces come together in one unique human. And if this episode made you realize that you need to stop guessing and actually start understanding what your own genetics and health data are telling you, that's exactly what I do with my clients. I use DNA, labs, pH360, much bigger picture of your health to understand what may be influencing how you're feeling. And more importantly, what you can understand and actually do about it. So if you'd like to learn more about working with me, head over to my website at healthyawakening.co. There is no S and there is no M at the end, healthyawakening.co. You can also reach out to me directly and we can talk about whether personalized health coaching or epigenetic coaching is actually right for you. We're always happy to connect. There's also the podcast Facebook page, Everyday Epigenetics, Raw, Real, Relatable podcast chat, where famously no one chats. So come on in, join us, spark a discussion, please. I'll go back and answer one of the many questions I've put out there that didn't get answered. And if you found this episode helpful, please share, subscribe, leave me a review or a rating. Those are the things that help other people find this podcast. And thank you so much for listening, because I'm getting lots of new listeners and I'm getting really great feedback on the information that we're putting out there, whether it's through experts or myself. And I'm here to help you. I'm here to help people you love. So please share this podcast. And I want to hear from you too. What MTHFR questions are you still confused about? What have you been told that you're not sure is actually true? What would you like me to cover in a future episode? Drop it in the comments. You can send me a message and I may use your question for a future episode. So thank you for listening. Now get out there, make it a great day, and be your most authentic self. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for tuning into my podcast. If you enjoyed this week's episode, I'd love for you to share it with someone who'd find the information useful. Please leave a review anywhere you listen to podcasts, and it'll help the information get out to others. If you're interested in seeing if we're a great fit to work together, the link is in the show notes below, where you can sign up for a free consultation with me. So go make it a great day and let your authentic self shine.